Good evening. My name is Enrique Walker. I'm the director of the AAD program at the school. It is a pleasure for me to introduce Willem Jan Neutelings on behalf of the school. I first met Willem Jan and his partner Michiel Riedijk about 7 years ago for an interview, and I have had the chance, in fact, the privilege to discuss the work a number of times over the past few years, from the book At Work, which we discussed at length right after it was published, to the series of public buildings that were included in the second monograph with El Croquis a couple of years ago, from the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision in Hilversum to the Shipping and Transport College in Rotterdam, to name a couple of buildings that you're very familiar with. The work of Neutelings Riedijk has relentlessly, I would say, contributed to architecture culture. I don't say field because I know Willem Jan is skeptical of the term. But I would also say that it has contributed to architecture culture in a silent way, and perhaps deliberately so. They are, in fact, concerned with the making much more than with disseminating. Some of you may be familiar with the project Ring Culture, Willem Jan's degree project at TU Delft in 1986, which scrutinized the emerging sprawl in European cities and identified a number of building types instigated by the Antwerp highways. In fact, learning from those highways where learning from the existing conditions was yet not a prevalent activity. Some of you may also remember the European Patent Office from the late 80s, a large-scale project that was won on a competition which buttressed Willem Jan's office at the very beginning, and which was based on a system of streets and courts many, many years before the revival of 1010 in the Netherlands. Others may remember a short polemical text in the 90s that endorsed Cedric Price's suggestion that the answer to an architectural problem is not necessarily always a building, and that an architect may consider doing almost nothing. Others may remember the university building in Utrecht, also in the mid to the late 90s, partly supported by a structure of the letters containing the name manhole-inspired, at a time when basically ornament was in fact not discussed, and certainly a polemical action. In fact, with hindsight, the work of Willem Jan and Michiel Riedijk has consistently contributed to the knowledge of architecture, and in fact reasserted the fact that architecture is a knowledge. Knowledge is in fact one of the premises of the book At Work and of their own practice. When we first extended an invitation to Willem Jan to lecture at Columbia about 2 years ago, we asked whether he would be willing to present one building. We were then planning to launch a series of lectures by practicing architects hosted by the AAD program on the making of one building which potentially affected the way in which we understood the making of buildings. And in fact, to trace the various concepts at play during the making of a building. The City Museum of Antwerp, the MAS, the title of this lecture, was then just completed after a decade in the making, and seemed to be absolutely adequate as a project. But then again, the Media Center in Hilversum or the STC building in Rotterdam are also buildings of the same caliber. I understand that Willem Jan will basically speak about MAS, but also about a number of other projects. So I'm looking forward to having the chance to catching up with the work once again. It is a pleasure, Willem Jan, to welcome you at Columbia again.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. It has been a while that I was speaking in Columbia, I think more than 10 years ago, actually in the last century. A century ago, yes. So that's why I thought that speaking about only one building was a bit less. And what I'm trying to do today is to give you the context in which this building was made by showing you a number of projects of our office, but through a theme. And a theme in which we... could you dim the light on the screen, please? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. The theme which we find important, and that is that actually two elements in our work which are quite important is the volume, the volumetric of the building, and the ornament. And we think that these two elements are very important in architecture, or at least in our architecture, because they can give identity to the community. And we believe strongly that, I mean, the goal in architecture is not to let's say, show the identity of the architect, but actually show the identity of the community, the context, or the whatever program is in the building. And using ornament in a contemporary way is a very interesting but very complicated process, but a very rewarding instrument. But of course, and that's why I want to first start with doing a little bit of history of ornament, because the problem is that since we didn't do ornament for the last 100 years, nobody knows how to do it. So one of the things is that we try by in our projects to reinvent this and to see if there is an answer to a contemporary ornamentation of buildings. Let's say if you go back about 150 years or 160 years even, there was a French-German architect called Hittorf. He lived in Paris, and he discovered, to the big shock of every architect at that time, that all the Greek and Roman buildings were not white. This is an extreme big mistake. I mean, all these buildings, ancient buildings, I mean, you've built a White House, but actually the Greek never have built a White House. They always built colored houses. And the idea was that the ornaments were also colored. They were polychrome. And Mr. Hittorf discovered this. And actually, it was a big debate among architects, but he was, through all kinds of archaeological findings, he could prove this, and he tried to, in his books, to reconstitute, to see how, to reconstruct actually the color schemes of these ornaments. So what you see here is the ornament of the Acropolis in Athens, which was beautifully colored, as you can see. Then 50 years later, a guy called Adolf Loos, I see that his name is still around here in the building. I don't know why, but he is the evil genius that, of course, forbidden the architects for 100 years to use anything of ornament, because he made this very important, or let's say very well-known, famous article, Ornament und Verbrechen, Ornament and Crime. Some people think it was called Ornament is a Crime, but that is not the case at all. He just said that ornament is something for primitive people, and his idea was that civilized guys, like he was, which would wear black suits and look serious, would not use ornament. I mean, ornament was for Indians, for primitive people that would have feathers in their hairs, and collars on their cheeks, and tattooed ladies and sailors. So he made these, for the first time, buildings without any ornaments. So you can see, this is his famous bank in Vienna, and you see that usually where in the 19th century all these windows would have these things around it, flowers and stuff, he didn't do it on purpose because he thought it was more civilized. This was a reason that for 100 years, between 1909 and 1999, nobody used color or ornament, and everybody was looking very serious and was wearing black suits as architects. You see ornamentation of a quite famous American architect. Strangely enough, another very serious looking architect, he's even in the same series, I understand, or he was already here before, also in a black suit. He reinvented the ornament. I mean, you couldn't hardly believe that he did it, but as a Swiss architect he did it, and he made these flower leaves of this plant on a candy factory, and actually it's the plant of which the candy is made. So it's a very interesting idea, because it's not just the plant, it has a relation, it contextualizes or expresses even the programming or the function of the building which is in it. But it's not so easy, because it means that you have to really reinvent the ornament as such. Next to the black guys, you have tattooed ladies, and the tattooed ladies, which is also very interesting, let's say over the last 5-10 years, ladies started to tattoo themselves, quite heavily, I must say. like this one, which is not a contemporary lady, but you can see that buildings also used to have tattoos. And this is a building in Vienna where with beautiful flowers tattooed on the building. And let's say there are 5 reasons for architects why you could still use ornamentation, or why ornamentation is a very interesting thing to think about or to use as an instrument. And the first one is identity. Of course, the reason why people use tattoos, and strangely enough, contrary to Adolf Loos, now even civilized people are doing it, is that they want to have a certain identity, which is special or unique, and that's why they do it. So their body expresses a certain idea about themselves that they radiate into the world. That is how also buildings, let's say, the ornamentation of buildings can contribute to this specific and unique identity of a building. It could also contribute to context because, as you see here, for instance, in the famous library in Mexico City, you see that the whole idea of the Mexican culture with the combination of Aztec elements, the combination of Spanish elements, the combination of this mural tradition and strong colors, is of course something that, you know, when you put it on this rectangular block, suddenly this block gets a completely different meaning. So also there, it's quite interesting when it can work. Scale is a third element. You see here the Paris arch, and you see that through the ornamentation, suddenly the scale completely changes. I mean, not only the sculptures, but also all these, I don't know how it actually, what is the word in English, but all these things change the scale, and it looks bigger or it looks smaller, and that is also a very handy instrument for an architect if you can play with it. Another thing is the tectonics. I think we don't really like, in our office we hate actually flush buildings that are smooth and shiny. And what is nice, for instance, if you take Gothic buildings, they have this lace work of stone, which gives it a tectonic, which means that during the day and during the changing of the light, the building changes and it gives a depth to the skin of the building, and in that sense also a possible meaning to it. And last but not least, the fifth element, which the reason to use it is that ornaments always, the real reason that you would have an ornament is that you need to organize a joint. I mean, basically you have 2 pieces of stone or 2 pieces of metal and they make a joint, and you have to cover the joint. Now the most important contemporary ornament is silicone, because let's say silicone is that really architectural element that is used to cover the joint over the past 20 years, and I find it a bit of a, not a very interesting way to get 2 pieces of building elements together, so we try to do it differently. Now, how do we work? I think the main idea in the office is that that our buildings are born naked, like children. I haven't seen any baby born with a dress on, and that you dress them after they're born. So that means that what we do is that we first work on this sculpture, work on the volumetric of the building, trying to find the real mass, the real volume, the composition of the building on the large scale of the building. It's a bit like Michelangelo, not that we are Michelangelo, but he always said that when he bought a block of marble, the statue was already in the stone and he just had to take it out. And we sort of buy these big blocks of styrofoam and then just try to find the building which is inside of the styrofoam already, but we have to get it out. So by using physical models and making hundreds of them, we find this building, but the building is then still not dressed, it's naked. In a way we don't know, we have no clue what we should dress it with. And then we try a lot of different garments to the baby, different colors, different patterns. And as you know, the whole concept of shopping, of course, is that you go out to change your body. I mean, that it's not because you have cold or warm, it's basically, okay, that's also the case, but basically you do it because you want to change your body or your image. So if you're a banker and you have a big belly and you want to look more powerful, you take vertical striping, because vertical striping makes your belly look smaller and you look more powerful because you're vertical. If you're a sailor, you use horizontal striping because then your belly looks bigger and you look like a tough guy, you know, with a tattoo. So it is colors and patterns are very important to change actually the volumetric of the building, which was made before. So the babies, in a way, are dressed afterwards, and sometimes in the design process, it's very deep in the design process that we really know what dress should be clipped on to the building. That means also that our buildings, and you see here a few of them, all look quite different. They look different in the sense that although they might be a family, as children are sometimes a family, but your son and also my son and my daughter look extremely different, although they come from the same father and mother, but they dress differently. And that I think is quite interesting because it's possible to make very different expressions to really make buildings that are a good answer to the client, to the site, to the program, to the community in which they are made. So what I wanted to do is to show you a number of these projects, and of course the museum also will be a major one in this, in which you see how we use, how we make them and how we use these volumes and these patterns for our purpose to make architecture. Do you think is it possible that somebody in the back could bring me a glass of water? That would be very, very nice. Thank you. The first, I will show 5 different types of buildings and 5 different types of approaches. The first one is buildings that have strong sculpture volumes and are made out of stone. A first building, which we did still by the end of the 90s, was a competition for a concert hall, and in this building we tried to see for the first time how we could use ornament in a specific way. Now, if you do a concert hall, and this was a concert hall consisting out of 2 halls, which were cantilevering from a middle core, which hold the theater tower and stage tower, the flight tower. The problem with concert halls is that they don't have many windows because usually, and theaters, they're usually completely dark or blackened out. That means that you have huge surfaces, and the idea is that was to see how these surfaces could be treated. In this case, we proposed a concrete prefabricated paneling system with a double layer and a second layer in bronze, making a 3-dimensional concrete skin. A skin where then, I mean, of course, then the next question is what can you use as a pattern? And then we thought that maybe it would be nice to use the acanthus leaf. The acanthus leaf is the leaf that's used in the Corinthian order, and that is always used for cultural buildings or for theaters. And if you would enlarge it, you would get these huge leaves, and it would wrap like a sort of a Christmas wrapping around the building, and would give the building a completely different shape and effect. So this was a first tryout. This was a second prize. I will show you lots of second competition prizes during the lecture. We always think that we won, that we were the best if we get the second prize, because the first prize is always a compromise. So you will see that our first prizes are not so good as the second prizes, actually. Another example of this. Thank you very much. Another example of this, which was built, is shortly after this, is the fire station in Maastricht, south of Holland. And actually, one of the problems in Dutch architecture is that it always has to be very cheap. I mean, the Dutch don't, like the Scottish, you know, they don't want to pay a lot of money. So we built actually 50% cheaper than the Germans. And we do this through trying to use special techniques. And one of the techniques is what the Germans call Plattenbau. That is the prefabricated concrete paneling systems, which are bearing systems, which are the bearing structure, and you build it like a sort of cardboard house. But this Plattenbau is a very boring system because it looks terrible, you know, from the East German, the Soviet type of architecture with the Plattenbau. It looks terrible, but you can do a trick. If you just ask them to pour 1 centimeter extra of concrete, then this 1 centimeter of concrete can give you any pattern, anything you want if you make a actually we use rubber molds to do that, and it's not very expensive, and you can do it. And so then again, you have to think, but what can you do with this rubber mold? What could it be? And we thought that actually fire stations are very macho buildings. They're macho guys inside, and we want to express it and strengthen the macho-ness by making the building relatively dark, sort of dark green, which goes very well with the red of the cars. And also, we thought that if we would drive with their fire trucks over the concrete when it was still fresh, we would get the imprint of these tires. And we actually, for a long time, we were looking to the tire. This was the Michelin X11, which we used. Actually, it's a winter tire, and we put it on the panels. And the effect is that the panels look stronger, but also the effect is that because there are many joints, and you sort of, if you can't beat them, join them, I think it's the saying, so that you get many joints, and then you don't see the real joints. So all of these joints, many of these joints, 80% are fake joints, but some are the real joints, and they're then gone. And the building looks taller and bigger, although it's a very small and cheap building. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna speak about this ornamentation question tonight, but there are many more factors in making a building in our office, many more things we're doing, but I cannot talk about every of these things, but a few, let's say another element, which is of course very important, is sustainability. We always try to be make really green and sustainable buildings. We think it's quite important to do that. And here you see an example in this fire station, that is that all the rainwater from the roofs is collected in a big pond on the roof. And then this rainwater we use it to fill the trucks, which means that if you go to extinct the fire is not taken out with drinking water, but with rainwater, which is a sort of interesting idea. But also, of course, we use it when the guys come back. They can sit along this pond as if they're in a chic hotel and just relax. And it's a combination of comfort and sustainability. And you see how the red and the green go together very well. But the pictures are the colors are not completely correct, but you have to believe me. Another example of that same period, where we try to see how we could do concrete ornament, it is a small theater in Belgium. Here we thought that, many of these theaters are now black boxes. If you remember the real nice theaters, like you have still some old ones on Broadway, but many of these modern contemporary theaters are just a black box, which is an idea of multifunctionality. So the idea is that if you want to be multifunctional and flexible, the architecture should look like nothing. So you get or these white boxes or these black boxes. And we thought that it is necessary that architecture always looks like something and not like nothing when the light goes on. And we made this imprint, again, with just using 1 centimeter extra of concrete. This is actually concrete poured in situ, which is quite nice with special molds. And little discs, metal discs on top of it, making a sort of wallpaper, wrapping again for this building. Another important thing which we really find very important in architecture is trying to get the public space, the public domain, into the building. This, for instance, is, you see the stage has a big window here, and actually it's this window which you see, and the window looks over a public space, a public plaza, which forms not part of the building, which is anybody can come there. It's part of the city. It's just an open part of the city, and also the roofs and all these stairs are used for all kinds of festivals. So what is very nice in this idea is that it's not the building itself. It's not interiorized, but it's the outside. It's actually the counterform of the building that really forms the social space, the space where the community gathers for all kinds of places, and inside and outside just, form a continuous public domain. A theme that you will see in many of our buildings and also in the museum coming back in the end. A building that is just finished is this library and cultural center in Arnhem, a smaller city in Holland, which has very clearly this idea that the public domain, the streets of the city, are taking into sort of boulevard that's going up into the building as a small, almost like a mountain village, where the streets go up, and you can find many doors of cultural institutes along this route going up. In order to express this route, because this route is sort of glass piece, I think, and making a very closed facade, we use this, again, the concrete paneling, but here the concrete paneling is put in a 90-degree to the facade as a sort of, how would you call it, lamella? I'm not sure what is the English word for that. Blinds, yeah, blinds, thank you. But also, we tried to do more than just making pieces of concrete, so that together with artists, we made these little incisions. And the artist made small medallions, which they did with Penrose mathematics. So it's a Penrose diagram. You know, Penrose was a famous mathematician that invented this Penrose mathematics, which means that you can make, it's a mathematics in which you make these patterns that are endlessly but never repeat, always make different patterns. And since this building was called the Knowledge Cluster because it has all kinds of knowledge institutes, the idea was to use a mathematical theme for the ornamentation. So you see here the building as it just opened a few weeks ago, where you see that well, these vertical striping has a very strong effect on the building, and you can see also the way that these little incisions work. Here you see it sideways. It works very strongly as an enclosed facade. And here a detail where you see these Penrose elements in the facade. Also here you see clearly the idea of continuing the public domain into this street. A big stair going up where you can find all the different institutes, libraries, and so forth, that also express themselves through a sort of shop windows almost along this public boulevard, which you can enter, let's say, for free. A second chapter and second type of buildings are buildings that have more platonic shapes, like simple boxes and rectangulars. And then actually it is a bit more complicated, because if most of the times this is related to the site, you know, when the site is rectangular, you get a rectangular box, basically. Sometimes it's related to also to money, to make a very cheap and simple thing. So for instance, this is, for instance, a printing office, a printing plant, I have to say, where they make books and magazines. And it's just a very stupid, simple shed, a steel shed on such an industrial area. But then the client asked us if it was possible to to express the quality of his printing, because he's making all these art books through his building. But of course he has no money, because he just, you know, has money for an industrial shed. So we try to find a way to again, by making a sort of wrapping paper almost, to do that. And we told them, you know, why don't we make our facade from paper? You know, we make a paper facade. You ask an artist or a graphic designer every week to make another design for your facade, and you print it because you have the machines, and you just glue it on. And then we imagine, like, you know, if you have these posters in the city, it gets thicker and thicker every week. So the building is getting thicker and it's changing every week. Well, I thought this was a good idea, and we came back a week later, and then our client said, yeah, you know, I cannot do it, because if I do that, then I have to print for my facade the whole week, and I cannot print for my clients. So I cannot make money anymore. So okay, well, let's do it once. We do it on glass, and then at least one time you have it. And we found this very cheap glass system. It's where you make it's for greenhouses, for tomatoes, you know, when you want to grow tomatoes in your garden. And there's this rubber, very simple rubber system, very cheap. And we put it in a cavity, 20 centimeter cavity, with a aluminum foley behind it, so that it gives a sort of depth to the building, to this facade. And then we found a poet, Mr. Schippers, famous poet in Holland, because we also are lazy architects. And what is easier to phone another person to ask, can you do our facade? You know, because it saves a lot of time and effort. So he's doing our facade. And said, yeah, okay. So he made a poem very nice poem, especially for the building. It was about the sun and the rain and Dutch mountains and I don't know what. And then a very well-known graphic designer, Karel Martens. He's quite good, I think. I think he even taught, well, maybe not here, but somewhere around here. And he made this layout, and then if you walk 7 times around the building, and if you're able to read Dutch, of course, you can read the poem. We did it again, or we tried to do it again in a Paris building in Paris. The same procedure. This is for a 1-star hotel, and I don't know if you've ever been in a 1-star hotel in Europe. Well, that's maybe as bad as 1-star hotels in the States. I don't know, but the problem if you get this commission, I mean, you don't want to get a commission like that because it is there's no money, you know, nothing to do, and it's completely, you know, the rooms are completely like boxes and completely engineered. I mean, you can't do anything to it. So the only thing you could do is, so we told these people, and they had, it was a 500-room 1-star hotel next to the motorway, to the ring road of Paris, the Paris Peripherique. We told them, you know, okay, we will do this, but then the only thing we ask you is to give us 1 letter per window. So, okay, well, 1 letter per window. I said, yeah, but they're a little bit big. They're like you know, the size of a window, and we make them out of steel. Okay, well, okay. Then we found another famous writer, Monsieur Rollin, famous French writer, and asked him to make a poem. And he did this poem, and it's very interesting because we told him you can only use 402 letters because we have 402 windows. So he started the poem, and he came back and said, yeah, I have a poem, 402 letters. No, you made a mistake because, you know, we also have between the letters, you need 1 window without a letter. So he had to go back. So it took a long time for him. He thought it was quite difficult, but he was, we were very interested in the oleopad. Well, Enrique knows about that. There were sort of French writers in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s that were doing writing and mathematics at the same time. So he really made this poem. And the interesting thing about the poem is about the place where it is. It's a very bad place, and he tells about addicts, drug addicts, and prostitutes and whatever. But the problem, of course, is that if you go around, you cannot go around it. You're in a car with 100 kilometers an hour, so you only get these catchwords. So he has these catchwords, you know, vie publique, Paris éthylique, Paris magnétique, and everything is in a rhyme. Even the catchwords are rhyming. And let's say if you come there a long time, you probably start to know what it is about. But anyway, the best part about the whole story is that the owner of the building is the richest man in France, Mr. Bouygues. It's the biggest construction company, and he is a very good friend of President Sarkozy. And President Sarkozy doesn't have so much money, so he's always invited on holiday to this yacht of Mr. Michel Bouygues, and then we imagine that, you know, he sits in his yacht and then he's drinking champagne. So, yo, Michel, what is this text on your building? And of course, Michel doesn't know because he has no clue about how he's making his money. So he phones to his assistant and said, you know, what is it? Qu'est-ce que c'est cette texte sur notre bâtiment? And then we imagine this assistant reading this text, and so Michel is getting it to the phone, reading it to Sarkozy, and they sort of. And the best part of it is that this guy is a famous Maoist terrorist. He in '68 he had a armed group of. Actually, he was a Trotskyist, I think. I'm not sure a Maoist, but he was fighting in the '60s with armed gangs in these '68 wars, and then of course talking about prostitutes and drug addicts on the building of the richest person in France. So we thought that was quite interesting. Let's say possibilities to, even with a 1-star hotel, to get all kinds of levels of cultural meaning. Not only for the people that just pass it, but even in a sort of deeper sense, contributing to the French culture and politics. Talking about politics, we made this building for Mr. Yudashkin in Moscow. Actually, it is a flagship store of Valentin Yudashkin. Valentin Yudashkin is the Armani of Russia, and he's making these beautiful romantic dresses, as you can see here. which are only liked by Russian ladies in Moscow and by Arabic princesses. And they look a bit sort of Walt Disney fairy tale kind of things. And he, at the same time, very interesting, this is Yudashkin himself. He also made the new uniforms of the Red Army. And you see Mr. Putin inspecting the uniforms. And then Putin told him that he should become the champion of fashion, the Russian champion of fashion, because the Russians want to have, let's say, a counterbalance between the Western fashion. So if they have Armani, the West has Armani, they should have Yudashkin. So Yudashkin phoned us, can you then help us to become this champions? And then we made this building for him. And in the building we used also text, but actually we used his logo. So his logo was printed in glass, and we sort of covered the whole thing with glass, and then used also the coloring of his dresses, and together with him tried to make this building happen. A building that, oh no, I don't have more of that, that also didn't come through. I mean, one of the problems if you work with politicians is that they don't last so long. So this, the main promoter was Mrs. Lushkov, the wife of the mayor. Actually, she was the most important project developer and also always buying his dresses. But then Putin, 2 years ago, Putin kicked out Lushkov, and Lushkov was banned from Russia. He lives now in London. And then, of course, the whole empire goes away, and the architect flushes away with the empire. That is a part of the risks of working in this kind of fields. But okay, it was fun to do. A third type of building is buildings that have double skins, and double skins or double facades is something we trying to exploit or trying to experiment with. We designed this building. This is the biggest casino in Holland, which also we started construction, but then it was stopped because there was a new after the elections, the Christian Democrats came in power, and they thought that it's a state casino in Holland. All the casinos are of the state. They thought that Christians should not promote gambling, so the state should not have casinos, and then also this stopped, unfortunately. But it had an idea that it has a double skin, where there are two skins, a sort of exoskeleton skin and an internal skin, and that they work together in a certain way. We make a lot of our buildings have a big hole in the middle, a big cavity, a big empty space in the middle. You will see more of those. In this case, and we use that empty hole. I mean, you could call it an atrium, but I think an atrium has not a very good connotation. It's a sort of collective void, let's say, in the middle. In this case, in which usually we try to organize all the circulation, but in this case, let's say if you lost all your money, you can go to this hole and sort of well, see where your money goes, or at least or leap in, or just smoke a cigarette, and then actually you see where all the money is sort of glued to the building. I was looking at the Trump Towers actually yesterday, and I thought that it was really great. This gold atrium. An opera house in Slovenia. Slovenia is a country that is sitting in the Alps. They have beautiful 3,000 meter high mountains, and you have the snow half of the year in the winter. And we try to make these sort of snowflakes, also with a glass skin, a double glass facade system. A building that is also very complicated because it's an opera house on a shopping center, and on top of it is a 5-star hotel. In this case, because it's private developer that makes the opera, but has to earn money with the hotel. And actually, this building, we hope, we're also in the middle of a political fight, but we hope, actually we got the commission now to continue it. It's a new concert hall of The Hague in Holland, in which we are now trying to make an exoskeleton that means that the skeleton of the building, the bearing construction of the building, structure of the building is on the outside. So it's not a clip-on facade, it's the complete external structure. There's some nice examples from the 50s from Gordon Bunshaft, very good American architect that always was doing that, and we tried to imitate that and also trying to find the right, let's say, poetic shape in order to make that bearing structure on the outside in a double skin system. Again, a very complicated building. There are 3 theaters on top of each other because we have a very small site. So we have a dance theater, a conservative theater, and we have a concert hall on 40 meter on the top, which is reached by an escalator route. We have to go all the way up to this concert hall. We hope to start building within 2 years. Towers. Towers are sometimes a bit boring because they're just, straight and vertical. So what can you do with a tower? We always think that a tower, you should not try to make composition with the windows. I mean, especially in residential towers, in many cases, what you see is that the windows get different sizes, and balconies, and by sort of mixing that into a composition, the architect tries to make a certain architectural composition of the building. We do it differently, so we start with the volume and make these cuts and these holes in the volume in order to make a strong volumetric sculpture that from every side, when you turn around it, has a different character. But also it helps you to make many different apartments, because you can imagine that every floor level has a different shape and gives you different apartment types. And then the facade again is a wrapping, so it's not, there's one type of window and they're put on a diagonal pattern, trying to not to show too much where the apartments are. You can't really see the individual apartment, and again it's like a paper wrapping around this volume, in which the composition of the volume is more important than the, or let's say this wrapping enhances this volumetric composition in a very good way. Another tower, we're busy trying to do this tower in Holland, and here actually it's again a sort of cheap tower because there's only one panel. So basically there's one panel, but the panel is turning the whole time, which enables us to make this tower, which is very expensive for a Dutch situation, but through using the panel and using the system. Actually, it's sitting on top of a museum. This is a museum of technology, which is forming the base for this residential tower. Another tower we made, which is interesting to talk about, is this tower for Paris. Actually, Paris is now making high-rises for the first time. I'm not talking about La Défense, but I'm talking about really the inner city. In the inner city, there are some places which are now designated to make high-rises. This is a 200-meter high tower, which we made last year. Yeah. The only problem in Paris, if you want to build high towers in Paris, your first name has to be Jean. If not, you don't get the commission. So my second name is Jean, but not my first name. So I, of course, Jean Nouvel won, and we were second in this case. But what is very interesting about this idea, I think, is that we try to find an alternative to the skyscraper, because the problem of the skyscraper is that it is extremely inefficient in the sense that high towers always have a very large core with many lifts and stairs, and you have relatively little net space around the stairs. Even more in the European situation, because in the European situation we have regulation that you cannot be more than 7 meters from the facade because of daylight regulations, which means that usually our towers are relatively slender, which make them even less efficient. The idea was that if you would make a 6-story building, but you would make a long story like a city block, you would carve out a garden in the middle, and you would put them on top of each other. Then suddenly you would get a very efficient building, because every floor has about 4,000 or 5,000 square meter net space, which is very big. You can make large spaces. But also, what is good about it is that you can use all the roofs. You have many roofs. And all these roofs can be planted with green roofs and water and solar panels and so forth. So it's a very sustainable building, but also you work around the roofs. And the other thing is that It's only 6 stories high, such a piece. So they make it on the ground, and then they hoist the whole thing up, which means that we can build it in a year quicker than a standard tower, because we don't have to hoist every building part, 200 meter. We can just build it from bottom up, yeah, let's say. Actually, we learned this in New York. It's an idea that we started with during the Ground Zero competition. We were actually invited in the SOM team to work with SOM on the competition, and we proposed actually to make a horizontal tower, because we thought that making another vertical tower wouldn't make any sense, because 2 days later somebody else makes a higher vertical tower, so you can never be the biggest or the highest. But if you would make a horizontal tower, nobody can beat you. I mean, you can make a longer horizontal tower, but that doesn't make sense actually to do it again. So we thought that this could be a sort of interesting experiment, of course, based on the Lisicki Wolkenbügel examples from the 20s. But SOM didn't really like it, so they made the Freedom Tower instead. But we are going to do a small one in Antwerp. This is a model of the Antwerp Port Control Tower, which we hope to start building soon. It's actually it's a control tower. It's 80 meter high. It's not as big as the one in New York, but it is a sort of first, let's say, a tryout to do that. And it sits at the entrance of the port. Antwerp is the second port of Europe after Rotterdam. It sits at the end of the port and tries to make a real sign at where the ships come in from the ocean. Actually, we did another one in Rotterdam. It's a bit strange, but this is also the Rotterdam Port. Well, it's not the Port Authority; it's the Maritime Institute, in which you have all the knowledge of shipping. And here you see two things. You see that also there's an idea to not to make a tower, but to make a sort of tower that becomes, it has a feet and has a head and it's almost like a snake or like a periscope. That the tower is a sculpture in itself. Not even really wanting to be a vertical tower, but wanting just to be a strong volume that is related to the, I cannot show it here, but it's related to the river. So the big lower part is the restaurant, this is the public restaurant, which is looking over the river, and the top part is a 400-seat auditorium overlooking the harbor and the sea. Well, you can see it here. And the whole idea of the building is that actually the expression here is through its volumetric composition, but also through its ornamentation, or let's say its skin pattern, is the idea that it doesn't look like anything else. Let's say it is not an office building, it's not a school, it's not housing. It is a bit like a harbor installation. That was also what we tried to make, a harbor installation, expressing it as part of this harbor area. Blending it into this industrial harbor feeling, atmosphere, but also giving it a unique character, because this institute is is the most important institute, at least they say themselves, in the world for this type of knowledge. So it's an expression of it's also sort of a corporate idea for their institute. Then, of course, we're trying to find a certain way to dress this building, and we thought that, let's say, got our inspiration from sort of stacked containers, using almost like a container ship. I think there was an image here, yeah, of the container ship, where you get the stacking of these containers, and using the silver and blue, it would blend in this container. Again, the skin would help to blend the building within this container atmosphere, within the harbor atmosphere, sorry. The building has no elevators, although it's 70 meter high. It only has escalators. And that, again, is a sort of social idea. It has to do with, well, first of all, it's a very simple transport idea. That's the fact that there are 2,000 students here. They have to travel very quickly between the different the classrooms. the only way to do that is to use escalators anyway. But it's also we had a long discussion with the director of the school, in which the idea is that if you use escalators, people behave differently because they, you know, if you are in a lift, in an elevator, you know, you say, and sort of wait, and then you have no clue who is under you or above you, you know, living 20 years, you're working in the building, but you have no clue. In the escalator, you go through all the different departments, so you see the people, what they're doing, and people are very cheerful and happy. They wave on the escalators, they talk on the escalators. There's a sort of movement, and these things are humming. So what's very beautiful is that there's a noise, there's a constant noise in the building, and even a sort of reverberation as if it is a boat or a ship. So we really love the idea that it also would help again to give it this kind of ship-like feeling. Here you see some of the floors. And on the top, in this cantilevering auditorium, actually again we used tried to use inspiration through the expression of certain maritime elements. In this case, through smell. This is all made out of vinyl. Vinyl smells horrendous, but it smells like boats. So you come in the auditorium, you smell. It's this vinyl smell that you have, and of course, it's also very safe. Because, let's say, if there's any accident happening, you can just take a cushion out of the wall, and then you can actually jump from here into the water, and you're perfectly safe. So that also helps within fire regulations and so forth. We're doing another tower in Cincinnati for the Cincinnati Art Museum, a tower that has no dress yet. Already for a long time we have been sort of suggesting this big tower next to as an extension to the existing museum, but since we're waiting for the funding, we also, if we don't know what it will cost, we don't know which dress we're gonna shop. You know, if you don't know how much money you have, you don't know where to go do your shopping. So we're waiting for the money first, and then we will think about the dress. So you see, it's completely naked still, standing on the hill in Cincinnati, waiting for the money. Then, the fourth chapter are buildings that have metal skins. Metal skins are interesting because you can do a lot with metal skins, and we use it often for buildings that have a sort of anthropomorphic volumetric. This is a residential building in next to Amsterdam. As you can see, you know, you had these problems with Katerina and Sandy. The Dutch, we know these problems, but we do it differently. We already built the houses in the water, so that if there is a flooding, they're in the water anyway. That makes it actually less complicated, but you can just swim around your building. So there are 5 of these buildings, apartment blocks, with apartments. The shape of the buildings is very simple. They are triangular because on this side is the south, so they have big terraces on this side, and on the north they have the view. But the main idea here is also to clad them in a sort of metal, but not nice shiny metal, but very dull metal, with lots of bruises in it, how you call it, like an old car, or maybe like an old Russian submarine drifted ashore on the Dutch shore. Important, let's say we do that because we think that it gives it renders this character, it gives this character to these buildings by using that type of claddings. We going a bit further here with this is a cultural center which is almost finished, and it's covered with half spheres, actually to make it look almost like a sort of punk bracelet. Many half spheres around the building that are very big balls actually, but give it a very special quality, again, very special identity. You know, there are ladies not only with tattoos, but also ladies with these kind of dog, how do you call it, dog collars. You see the workers mounting the balls, the spheres. And actually they continue all the way in, so the ceiling of the building. This is the main library hall. It's also filled with those things that, of course, give them a really nice light condition and shadow effect. As you can see, we don't have many ideas as architects. So that's why, let's say, if you can only come up with half spheres, I think you really need to call an artist. So that's why for this one we call an artist, and we got all this interesting stuff. This is the central tax office of Holland. It's the most hated building of Holland, not the building, but this is the building where you have to pour your money in, or at least the digital mainframes of the Dutch tax system are here. And if you get a letter from these guys once a year, you're not very happy. But it's the Dutch mainframe. It's a very important building. It's extremely high security, very high security, which was one of the main driving forces of the design, because we wanted to avoid that this is a sort of Fort Knox with many walls and many barbed wire fences and so forth. So we thought that if you would put it completely underground, like a sort of James Bond Thunderbirds kind of building, and cover it with water, then you would be completely safe, and you wouldn't need any barbed wire or whatever, because this is just the street. This is where pedestrians go. It's a nice residential street. You have this beautiful pond of water. And if you see a guy with wet trousers, you immediately know he's the guy, we have to catch him. So you don't need all those fences, but the water then again is used for many other things. I mean, it's a rainwater collector. It's used for the sprinkler system. It's used to cool the building. So it's there's no air conditioning. The complete cooling is done with the water basin. And we also use it to flush the toilets. So it's a whole idea where sustainability, where cheapness, where security, but in the end also architecture quality and identity come together. So that's something where we really want to, let's say, we never try to approach it from one point, but we try to, let's say, get all these different elements together. And we found this artist. Actually, we didn't phone in Holland. There's actually, in most European countries, there's a system, I don't know if you have that in the States, where a certain percentage of the building, if it's a government building, has to be, it's usually 1% of the building cost, has to be spent on art. So you always get this artist that you don't want to have, because they selected the artist. But in this case, we were able to be part of the selection committee, and he then made all these dragons on the building. Dragons that were, how do you call it, molded in the stainless steel. And this is also very good, because if you are an architect and you say, to your client, I want dragons on my building, they say, are you crazy? But then if you say, if the artist says that, say, oh, it's art, oh, fine, yeah, let's have dragons on our building. So it's also a very good way, actually, to do it. And of course, in historical ornamentation, it was always artists that would do the ornaments, not the architect. And we're trying really to find again this sort of collaboration between artists and architects for the building. It's not very easy, because artists don't really like it, because they, of course, since after Mr. Loos said that architects shouldn't work with artists anymore, they didn't have jobs. So for 100 years they were out of the job. Then they invented the idea of the autonomy of the artist. And now we say you have to work within the canvas of the building, which is for some artists quite difficult, because they feel it, they feel like being in a hierarchic. I say they feel that they are in a sort of secondary position towards the architect, and not they cannot do whatever they want because they're bound to certain architectural rules. He not only made the dragons. Well, his story is that dragons always protect money. He just came back from a trip to China or something, where that seems to be the case. But in Holland we never had dragons, but okay. He also made these vases, and these vases pour the water. It's very important that the water is always stirred, not shaken, in order to avoid ice and rotting in the water. So it's part of an ecological system also. But also, of course, giving identity to this building. The same artist did the sort of drippings in the inside, big carpets, wall carpets that are used to for the acoustics, but of course also to get light, very nice light. So the light actually, because the light is coming down in these elements, so that actually here we are under such an element. You have top light and you have nice meeting corners, also done completely by the artist. There's a big interior garden, which is actually dug out on the basement level, so that you can also freely go out to the office. But also in the underground corridors, actually everything is made out of prefabricated concrete. So these are prefabricated concrete panels that are actually the structure of the building. So we don't have any cladding. We immediately make the final finishings, and even all the electricity and all the installations are within the system. But he made little, again, we just gave him 1 centimeter extra. He made all these little funny things in the prefab concrete, and it looks as if it's like a 1,000,000-year-old stone, you know, with fossils, but it's just, you know, 1-year-old concrete. And that again, it proves that it is possible to, in a very simple way, actually to do things with the ornamentation, to give it the tactility, to give it an identity, and to make buildings that have a strong character for the client and for the community that works in the building. Then we come to the 2 museums. Actually, museums are very complicated things, because they are, you know, they're just necropoles. They're actually, what is a museum? A museum is old stuff from dead people, and lots of it. And the question is, how can you make an expression of that? An expression that is respectful on the one hand, but on the other hand also shows the strength of the vastness of history, and of all these objects that are left in our custody from our ancestors. There are two museums I want to show you. The first one is the Sound and Vision Museum in Holland. This is actually the National Archives, the Dutch National Archives, of all the audiovisual material that was made in the 20th century. That means every film, every movie, every tape, every music recording, every radio or every television recording that was ever done is in this building. They have more than 1 million recordings, but of course recordings is nothing. I mean, you cannot see them. Well, you could hear them, but only through a machine. But many of them are difficult to hear or to see because they need difficult old machines. But so they have 1 million of these things, and how do you show that? I mean, how do you also, what kind of expression would you give to the building? So of course we didn't know, so we phoned an artist. Can you do an expression for our building? And he, together with him, we developed, and with the director of the institute, we developed the idea that the whole thing would be a bit like a broken television, but that actually he would do that through using 1,000 images from this collective memory, because it's a very important. Actually, this is our museum of the 20th century. This is the collective memory of Holland, and he uses these images, famous images. You know, we have our Queen on a bicycle, and we have our famous soccer player Johan Cruyff making a goal, and blah blah blah. So we have these images that everybody knows, and he uses them and he blurs them. So what he does is that, actually, you see here, this is our former prime minister, and then he blurs it with a computer system, and then he brings in color, and at the end, he brings back the faces. And then, together with the glass industry, we made a special machine that could cast glass. So actually, through computer milling, he made the molds, and then the glass is cast, and you get a relief glass, so a glass with thickness, which is thicker and thinner. And when the light is catching the glass, you can see here, it becomes like a sort of hologram, and the faces of the people are coming out of the glass, and you see these famous politicians or movie stars or TV stars, whatever, coming to you, and you can recognize them. In that way, actually, the expression of this whole building is sort of the expression of what is in their collection, which is an old Dutch idea. Here you see a 16th century Dutch house, and actually the rich art collectors in Holland, they like to completely cover their house on the inside with all the paintings they had, and in that way we sort of try to do the inverse, to sort of put the paintings on the outside of the building. You see how it changes during the day, the quality of the building, and during the night when there's a backlighting of this building. But actually, this is only half of the building, because the building is 25 meter high, but half of the building is underground. And the reason for this is that we need to make this archive. So when you come in, you see that actually, so this level, when you come in here, actually suddenly there's the same building as big, but then underground. It's 6 stories underground, and you're actually entering in the middle. You're entering on a bridge. And then it's very dangerous because it's like, you know, it's like if you have, it's very much a sort of vertigo experience. You look down in this pit, in this Dante's Inferno, it's a real inferno, and you see this big necropolis of all these dead people and all these voices from these dead people and this music from the dead people and images from the dead people. It's coming out of the pit, you know, it's like they're coming to you. And we made this orange light, so as if they're still, you know, living there. So you have the feeling that this whole history is still there. So we wanted to create this physical experience of this vast collection and this vast collection of historical collective memory of the Dutch recordings. So actually it's death. You walk over the death, over the river Styx, and on top of you is floating this strange space craft. Actually, there you have the future. It's the children's museum, so the children are in it. So you have all these dead people on the ground, and then the children on the floating in this metal cloud. And in between is the present. So this is a big hall in which they do all the television awards and all kinds of parties, and it's a very social space. It's also again a continuation of a public domain within the building. The top is clad in metal, little metal pieces, and these pieces are done like an old microphone. They're hanging on little reverberators, so that they constantly, within the ventilation system, they're constantly sort of moving, which gives it a very lively effect, rather than having a dull, you know, fixed panel. So these panels make different, actually, colors, or different, not colors, different reflections, as you can see, and they have, in this way, they get different tones of grays. This looking from the top, there are different rooms where researchers can look at the tapes or listen to the music. The restaurant. There are a number of viewing rooms where you can see old movies. We also use the walls with different color systems and double skins. And actually it's the biggest building we ever built where you cannot see the building itself because it's all, this is the main children's museum. It's completely painted in this blue, which they use on television for the weather report when somebody's pointing at this map, which is not existing because it's a blue chroma key map. So it's a color which you cannot see. And then finally the building that was on your poster. Sorry, it took a while, but maybe you also like to see the other ones. I thought it's boring to see only one building, and you get a bit of more idea of what we're doing and why this building was also part of a whole way of thinking. This again is a necropolis. It's 400,000 objects of all the dead people of the city of Antwerp. 2,000 years of history of the city through all kinds of objects, not art objects, but you know, pots and pans and objects of daily use. That every object, you know, telling a story about how people were living, about things that happened in the history of the city. So we really wanted to make a tower to show again, a bit like the other museum, to show the immensity of the history. We also wanted to make a monumental tower. We like monumentality, as you have seen already in some of the other buildings, because we think that it is important for public buildings to be monumental. These are the only buildings that can represent the community, that can represent our city or our, you know, the things, the reason why we like our city or why we are proud to show our friends that come from another place to go there. So on purpose, we didn't make a real museum. I mean, the museum was almost an alibi to make this tower. And the trick is that we have 10 big boxes. So you can see that again here. You have 10 big boxes, and they're put on top of each other, and they are turning. So every floor, there's a 90-degree turn where these boxes are, so they're not put on straight on top of each other, but turned, giving a spiral, a big spiral. Actually, the whole building is one big staircase. It's a spiral staircase going up. And again with escalators that bring you all the way up to 60-meter high lookout point. And again, this helps a lot because it means that actually it is again the metaphor of life and death. It is everything which is dead, the past, let's say the past is in these boxes, in these tombs, as you would say, and the life is within a sort of spiral of life, and it's completely out of glass, and it's overlooking the city. So the city itself, the living city, becomes the main object within the City History Museum. See? So it is always present, and it is a sort of anchor point to which you can go back if you've seen on each floor, if you've seen certain histories of the narratives of the city. It's also quite important in terms of museum type, because I think one of the, as you know, the museum typology usually is an enfilade, is a series of rooms where you go from one room to the other, which actually is extremely exhausting. And I was in the Metropolitan today, and actually you really have to go from one room to the other. You have to, if you want to go to the American wing, you first have to go to the Greek wing or to the other wing, and you never, in this case, the whole routing goes around the exhibition rooms. That means that you can sort of zap, and you can pick one or two rooms and come back another day and pick another room without having seen, let's say, the surprise of the other rooms. Also, it's a public domain. This is completely open, or it's open to the public 24 hours, so you can always go there. I mean, the boxes, the exhibition space is closed at 6, but you can go until midnight. Actually, you can even get picnic baskets there, and then you can go kissing with your beloved and looking at the moonlight or at the sunset. And there are many parties and things happening there. So it's like a public street, which means that the people are also using it as a public street, and there are many things happening. In the materials used, we again tried to make a very strong distinction between this, let's say, the past, which is then in this stone tombs, let's say stone blocks. And also you see that the interior is completely the same as the exterior. So the sculpture goes on, so you really have the feeling that you walk on the exterior, even if you're inside. And then the glass is set against this stone. The glass is not straight, but it is curved glass, corrugated glass, which gives the glass also a very distinct character. It's not just glass, but it becomes like a curtain. It's folding, and it mirrors or it breaks even the side to the city. The Antwerp people like it a lot because they have a cathedral with one tower, and actually they didn't have enough money in the 16th century to build the second one, but now when you look through the glass, you see two towers if you go and stand in the right angle. But it has this quality again of life and death, and also we also again try to do that to enhance that effect by using different temperatures. So this is an outside space. That means it's not air conditioned, so it's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter. But of course, if you go inside inside the box, inside the exhibition spaces, there we need to have this international temperatures and humidity by international museum regulations. So you also you go from, let's say, 21 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius in summer, or the other way around in winter, which gives you again this feeling of transition between let's say a past and present. And every time you're back, and you'll be able to overlook the city and see where you are. Also here we were using ornamentation. There are a number of elements. One of the things is that we were looking for a red stone, because red brick is very common in Antwerp. But of course, if you make a building of small bricks, it doesn't look very monumental. So we found this red Indian stone. Actually, it comes from 4 different quarries. from going from purple to red to orange. And on the stone we put these little metal elements. And actually there are 3,000 of these, the slide isn't so clear, but you cannot see it very clearly here, but you see it in the detail. Actually these metal elements are hands. Why are they hands? They are hands because the logo, let's say the coat of arms of the city of Antwerp, since 1207, so already for 800 years, is the hand. That's also why the name is hand, werpen, hand. Antwerp comes from hand. And since it's the City Museum, we use the hand. And actually, it is also a bit, I really have to warn you, don't do this at home. It's very dangerous to do ornamentation because you might be on the edge of kitsch. But at the same time, kitsch is something people like a lot. And what happened is that suddenly these hands became the main feature of the sponsoring, the funding of the building. Actually, there are 3,000 hands. You can buy a hand. Even you can still buy a hand. You can go to a website. You can buy a hand for €1,000, and then your name is for eternity linked to this hand. You get a piece of paper and a medal and whatever. So many people started to buy these hands. You know, your soccer team, a family, whatever. Or people would even give the hand as a present to somebody who would, you know, have would be married or something like that. So what is interesting is that all these people are dying, these 3,000 hand people, and they now are becoming part of the collection of the museum. So it's even interesting that, let's say, although this was a sponsorship action, that suddenly these hands represent people, or represent families, or represent clubs, and that within 100 years, again, there are 3,000 objects that tell a story, a narrative about the city of our time. So it became also a very important element, the ornamentation, in the acceptance of the people, or let's say in a way that the people started to relate to the building in a very strong manner. And we actually the building is a big success. They expected 200,000 visitors the first year, but 1 million came, and 1 million came the second year. We're in the third year now. And they all like it a lot, and I don't know why. Let's say we were thinking, why do they like it? You know, because usually, you know, if you as an architect, if you made a building, you better not come back to that city again because they all hate you, and they all hate contemporary buildings, and nobody likes our building. I mean, it's strange, you know. We are sitting here and doing lectures, but everybody hates us. So why do they like this? We were thinking, and then we thought it had to do something not only with the ornamentation, but also with the materialization, with the material of the building. Because the material speaks to you. And you know, if you make a white wall, the white wall says, I'm not here. Hey guys, I'm not here, I'm a white wall. I'm not here, I'm a white wall. If you make a red wall, and a red wall that is, you know, has these veins and these stuff, the first thing people, you know, when they come in, they start to caress the wall as if it's their dog, you know. So they immediately make a relation with the building for some reason, because there's this tactility of the building. The same is with the glass, you know, the people that, if you have glass that is plain glass, the idea of this glass is that, you know, it's glass is saying to you, I'm not there, I'm transparent. You can look through me, I'm not there. So the whole thing is that all these contemporary minimalist buildings don't want to be there. They don't want to have a relation to the people. This glass, I mean, also people are sort of touching the glass, and the glass is very strongly there. I mean, you cannot look through it even. It's not even very well I mean, there's a certain transparency, but not. There's at the same time a presence of this glass, which is very strong. So we think that in some way all of our theories are slowly proving to be true because of let's say the way that people are coming to this building and starting to relate to the building. Of course, again here, as you know, as we are like to not to do just aesthetics, it's actually a very technical reason that the glass is corrugated. If you make corrugated glass, it stands by its own, so it doesn't need any support. The wind it's a wind breaking system. It's only fixed on the top and in the bottom, and we don't need any steel or metal support systems because of the curving. You could imagine if you fold a piece of paper, put it on your table, it stands by itself. So again, there is a whole series of ideas that come from a technical point of view, but at the same time, let's say, enhance the character of the building in a strong way. In the inside, we don't have the hands because you would stumble over the hands. So we have in the floors and on the walls, we have a sort of medallions that are also made by an artist, a well-known poet from the city who made a special poem for it. But again, it's used for all the technical equipment. So every sprinkler device, every lamp, every smoke detector is built within this medallion, and there's nothing there. We have also the biggest Luc Tuymans. Maybe you know Luc Tuymans. He's the most expensive living artist, at least in Belgium, but I think maybe not around the world. But he's I think also in the museums here there are many paintings of him, and he made a very nice painting of your former foreign minister, Condoleezza Rice. He made a very nice painting of her. Actually, this painting is hanging in Washington. But it is the biggest painting. Well, it is existing as a painting, but he used it to make a big mosaic on this plaza in front of the museum. Actually, we asked him to do that, and it is the memento mori. So it's the graph, the tombstone of Mr. A famous Antwerp painter from the Renaissance, Quentin Matsijs, a painter he likes very much, but it was very important in that period. Actually, he committed suicide, Quentin Matsijs, and that's why he was not buried in the cathedral, but outside of the cathedral. And if you stand all the way on the top of the tower, you can look down and see this big skull. Again, interesting because it's again a sort of narrative about history, death, painting, art, culture, and so forth, which is really helping also the building. But at the same time, people are dancing on it, because if you're on the street, you don't see what you're doing. So you're dancing on the biggest Luc Tuymans in the world, which we always like to think about. Also, you see that the whole building is taken by the people, appropriated by the people. There are many parties going on the whole time in this public street, and that also makes the museum into something that is more than just a museum, but it is really a sort of community center, a tower for the people where they can look over the city, where they can have parties and where they can relate to, giving it a new identity to the city of Antwerp. So that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you like to, I can take some questions if you want to ask some things. There's a microphone behind you.
Hi, thank you for coming. I was just wondering if you think that there's a current Dutch style of architecture today, maybe something like an emphasis on continuing public space inside, maybe a certain degree of, or a certain kind of unseriousness as compared to maybe the men in black suits who you featured in the beginning, and maybe a use of color, and if so, how you see your work in relation to this style.
Yes, thanks. No, there's not such a thing as a Dutch style. I think that if you see many of the Dutch architects, and you probably know a few, they work quite differently. I think if you would compare our office to a UN studio, for instance, they do completely different things, and many other studios. So it's not there's not such a thing as a common style. There's not even such a thing as a common way of working. I think there are many different approaches. But of course there is a certain, the only relation is that of course we have been, we come from the same culture and the same environment, and I think there are certain elements in the Dutch culture that are relevant, what you can also see in our work. One of the things is that Holland has no topography or geography. There's a saying, actually it's I think an American saying, that God created the world and the Dutch created Holland. So we have this idea that anything goes, you know, that because we made our country out of the sea, that means that everything is relatively based on an engineering idea. That's first. I think so. You see that in many of the Dutch architects, they work not based on an aesthetic presumption, but merely on first of all on a technical question, on an engineering question first. But it secondly also means that whatever you can imagine, you can make, you know. So in a way, there's not we don't feel ourselves very bound to history or to tradition. I think that is also something you see in the Dutch attitude, or although it might lead to completely different results. Then of course there is an element that we have, because of the fact that we have to build so cheap because of our industry, we have also a tradition in which you immediately have to go to the questions, how can you make it, and that a lot of the things we are doing are coming from an exaggeration of the possibilities of the industry, which makes it possible to do these projects. So there are many of these aspects that are part of a Dutch culture. There are also other aspects, like, and you know the old Dutch painting. So there is even idea of light, you know, which is very strong in our country. If you know the Vermeer paintings, I think the way the light comes into a building, the way that you use certain colors, which are relatively blunt, indeed, if you would compare it to other countries. So these are cultural elements that are there, but then I think that the way they are used by the different offices are quite different. So I don't think there's something like a Dutch school there.
Thank you for the lecture. There seems to be a lot of tension between the ornament and the programmatic massing or volume of the building. And I was wondering if you could speak more on that relationship between program and then kind of the ornament wrapped around it.
Well, I don't think it's a tension. I think there are two elements of many more elements that form, let's say, architecture. But of course there is let's say it is a struggle because of the lack of, because ornament was not there for 100 years. It's difficult to I mean, you have to rebuild or rethink and try to do it again, and you cannot fall back on older examples because they don't work. I mean, we cannot start to put, you know, carved angels on a building. That would be a bit strange. So you try to see if you can do it with serigraphed photoglass, or to see it if you can do it certain imprints, or use, you know, concrete or whatever. And then, so there's a question of the material. There's a question of the production, which is quite complicated, because let's say what of course was interesting in the ancient or in the 19th century ornamentation was that this was made by craftsmen, by which, of course, because the labor was cheap, you could make a lot of different stuff. Nowadays you cannot do it because labor is very expensive. But what is interesting is that since the computer, and that is where the computer is getting interesting, is that the computer enables you, especially through computer production, I think it's computer, not computer design, but computer like milling and so forth. You can make many different objects within one system and make it in a mass production way, where it doesn't have to be repetitive, but it can be, you know, it can be different and playful. And then of course there's the idea to use the artist to give more meaning and expression to it, which is of course also the old idea of making an ornament. So that is these are elements that are interesting to explore, but not so easy because, as I already said, it's a bit on the edge. I mean, you have to be careful not to go over the edge. You have to find let's say, a sort of balanced tuning between expression and between being not too blunt. What I should say is that, let's say, in that sense, don't do this at home. Most of the buildings I show, almost all the buildings are public buildings. And if we do a normal residential building, we wouldn't do that to such an extent. We think that you especially have to do it, or it's important to do it, or you can do it at least, with public buildings, because public buildings, they need to have a stronger expression. They need to, to represent the community. They represent an idea in the city. And that's why we think that there it is good to do it. But it is something which I think needs much more research and much more experiment to see where you can go with a contemporary expression or contemporary ornamentation. Yes.
On technology in the office, buildings and materials technology, because it seems integral to the design process, but then when you were speaking about the Cincinnati Art Museum, it seems that it might possibly come later in the process as well.
Yeah, it is true that in the beginning sometimes we don't really know what we have to, how we have to make our facades. And then we do indeed a lot of research. There are different elements to it. Let's say it depends on the budget. It depends on the possibility of the industry. If you use stone, you come in a completely different world than if you use concrete, prefabricated concrete, or metal or glass. In all cases, we try to see what are the, let's say, one of the big elements of the research is what can you do, how far can you go with what the industry can produce. So, for instance, for the museum, the television museum, we work together with glass, one of the biggest European glass manufacturers, and we actually build a new machine. Actually, even the process of making the glass was not existing, and they helped us to develop that. It took 2 years. So a machine that could make this sort of glass that is not flat, but let's say is a relief glass, and also has the pigments in it. So it's quite a complicated technology to build. But also the industry likes to do that often because, of course, they use it then. Actually, we are completely stupid because we worked 2 years with them, we lost money on it, and they got a patent, of course. So then now they're selling it everywhere as a fancy product. So the industry also likes to do it because they can make new products, and especially with these kinds of buildings where there is enough time and enough money to develop it. Well, not so much enough money, because sometimes it's not per se expensive, but there's a time and a will, of course, of the client to develop it. Then I think you can do it. But we do it a lot indeed with the industry. That means also that you sometimes are not completely sure if it will work. For instance, in the television museum, we started to build a building and doing the research on the glass at the same time. So we knew that we would have a cladding, but we're not sure yet what the cladding could be. And during the process of making the foundations and making the, the concrete structure of the building, we were still testing that stuff. Actually, what we also do is we do a lot of we make a lot of physical models in the office, also of the materials. So we do a lot of one-to-one models, trying to see how it would work and really making prototypes and mock-ups ourselves or with the contractor or with the industry in order to make that happen. But it's something you have to do, you have to invest a lot of time in it. I mean, you cannot do it really with off-the-shelf products. So you have to, but we like it because it's fun. I mean, the development of these new products is a really fantastic job in itself, which you like to do. I mean, it's more fun than taking off-the-shelf stuff. But indeed, it is part of the design process in that way. Yes.
Can you mention the 5 reasons why buildings are tattooed apart from identity.
Why, 5 reasons why buildings should be tattooed?
Yeah, apart from identity.
Why 5?
Yeah.
5, okay. Now, actually, I explained the 5 in the beginning of the lecture. So I think 1 is identity, indeed. That is because I'm not talking about tattoos, but I'm talking about, let's say, the fact that a building is not a white block, but has a color, has a pattern, has a texture on the block. So I think 1 is the possibility to give it an expression that conveys a story of, or conveys at least, makes a relation with what is inside the building, what is done in this building, or even a relation with the context. So this identity, I think, is important. Second is that, as I was explaining, is the possibility of scale, the fact that it changes the scale of the volume, and by making patterns, you can change, you can use it to deepen the composition of the building. So it's a composition question, identity, composition. The scale I mentioned. No, I forgot the other 5. Sorry? Covering the joints. Yeah, that was a very good one. So let's say the ornament has a reason because it needs to do a covering, and I think the most simple one is a plinth. If you have a wall and a floor coming together, you need a piece of wood, which they call a plinth. And of course the plinth can take, in this case the plinth is black, although the wall is white and the floor is blue. And it's white plaster and blue, how do you call it, textile, and a black wooden plinth. Like, why is the plinth black and of wood? I mean, I don't know, it could be red and out of metal. So you have to think about, how to make the joint and what the joint can be. So that is another reason, I think, to do it. Did I already have 5? I think I had 1 is the tectonics of the building. So the fact that the building, let's say, during the day can make different shadows, can have a sort of tactility, which I think helps the building to get a stronger character. So actually, these are the 5 elements. You can take one more. Excuse me? No, they're not self-cleaning. Actually, they're cleaned with a sponge and water. There's no difference in doing this or doing that. It's like a car window, the window of your car. So there's not a maintenance problem with curved glass. I mean, if you can clean the window of your car, you can clean the window of your building. No, if it's curved. No, we just have it like in any building. We have a how do you call it? A little gondola on the roof. They step in the gondola, they go down, and they do this. No? It's not different than with any other building.
Volume, and you talked about the skin in using different terms, but like for example in this building the structure is very interesting, but you didn't talk about it once. Yeah. So what about expression? Yeah, I'm sorry, but the problem with buildings, there's so many aspects to a building that you can talk for ages about it. So I took a few themes, but you're right, structure is for us a very interesting theme. We work a lot with structural engineers, and we always try to get very good ones. This building has a very interesting structure because it has no columns, so everything is cantilevered. So actually we have a central core, which is 12 by 12 meter, and from the core you have big trusses going in 2 directions, but because it's a spiral, they go like this. They go like this, this, and they make a spiral, and then actually the steel trusses, and then the outside facade or the inner facade is structural, and it is made out of prefabricated concrete panels, 6 by 2 meter, and they are put on the steel structure, and then they are welded together. So you have pieces of metal sticking out.
That means that the whole external facade becomes a one monolith beam, let's say, that holds the thing together. So it's it's a bit complicated if you tell it like this, but it's relatively simple, but it works very well, and it enables you to make these cantilevers, because we have, of course, floors of 6 meter high, but we have triple or double or triple floors. These beams become 6, 12, or 18 meters, so they become it becomes a very rigid structure. The problem here is not so much as the structure. It's quite simple to calculate it and to make it. No, sorry, it's quite simple to calculate, but it's difficult to make it. And the reason for this is that the cantilevers come down when the weight of the building is put on. So we had to calculate the amount of how many centimeters the cantilevers would come down. And in the worst cases, it was about 15 centimeters, so this much. But that means that if you put your wall like this, if you put the outer wall on it, which is the concrete slab, the concrete wall, and it would go down, then the wall would be, how do you call it? It would be on an angle. So the trick is that you have to do a calculation that you put all your walls in a counter angle, and then when it goes 15 centimeters down, it becomes straight. And so the problem, many of these cases, the problem is not the calculation, because it's simple computer calculations, but the problem is to make it in reality. And so the contractor has a lot. You have to work very precisely with the contractor on the measures of the thing. So it's quite complicated. The same goes for the glass. The glass is a very simple trick, because you have it's a 19th century technique. You have an oven. You have a sand mold. It goes into the oven, 6 meter long oven, and you get a curved, an S-shaped piece of glass. Then the problem is to put these pieces of glass, let's say on 50 meter high, next to each other, and they're not fixed to each other. But you can imagine that if you have an S-shaped glass, then it tends to do this, let's say, but the other one tends to do like that. So the main problem is that the joint between the two pieces of glass, which you want to be not more than, let's say, 20 mil, sometimes they go to 50 or 60 mil. So and then, you have to put these two glasses together with the joint. So the most of these, let's say, what is very interesting but also complicated is that most of the things on the drawing board you can do relatively easy to draw them and to calculate it, but the main problem is in the montage, let's say, in the, how do you say that in English? The assembling of it. And that's where it becomes, that's where you need a really good contractor and a really good collaboration with the contractor to get it done in a proper way. Okay, thank you very much.